said, "Thank you for 25 years of work in the company, but you're fired. Tomorrow, you won't be around anymore." But he didn't know what awaited him in 9 days. Everything in this video is connected to each other, so watch it to the end, and don't rewind. The final scene will surprise you. The gray November sky pressed like lead. Olga stood heavy at the fresh grave, tightly clutching a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. Gathered around, a few relatives and colleagues, those who came to say goodbye to her mother. The last 2 weeks had become an endless marathon between hospitals, work, and home, but you can't save your mother. Succeeded. Hold on, Olenka, whispered Aunt Vera, hugging her shoulders. Olga nodded, unable to say a word. A lump in her throat made it difficult to breathe, but she didn't allow herself to cry. Mom always said, "Be strong, daughter. So that, whatever happens, keep your back straight." Colleagues took turns coming up with condolences. Maxim, her immediate supervisor, was here too. He briefly shook her hand and uttered the usual words of support, but impatience was visible in his eyes, as if he was in a hurry to return to his business. In the evening of the same day, when Olga returned to an empty apartment, the phone vibrated from an incoming message. "Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I'm waiting for you in my office. An important issue needs to be discussed." Even in mourning, Maxim couldn't give her such a moment of respite. The next morning, at 9 o'clock sharp, Olga knocked on the office door. Director Maxim sat behind the massive table, immersed in studying documents. Without raising his eyes, he pointed her to a chair. "Take a seat, Olga. We'll talk." "Difficult," he began, finally looking at her. "In connection with the restructuring of the company, we are forced to optimize. Your position falls under." Olga felt the contraction, as if the earth and 10 years of work disappeared from under her feet. Sleepless nights, on personal projects, relationships with key clients, all this, crossed out with one stroke of the pen. When she could only say, "After 2 weeks, all necessary payments will be produced according to legislation," Maxim answered dryly, handing her documents. After leaving, Olga mechanically reached the office of her workplace. They were spinning in her head, snippets of thoughts. How is it possible? Why right now? What to do next? She remembered how, 3 years ago, it was she who helped Maxim keep the largest client when he was about to break the contract. How she worked overtime while cooking presentations for his speeches. How she covered up his mistakes before leadership. The first impulse was to write a devastating letter to the Council of Directors, revealing all Maxim's machinations with reporting, about which she accidentally found out 6 months ago. Fingers had already reached for the keyboard, but she stopped. Mom's voice sounded again in her head. "Revenge is the poison you drink, hoping that your enemy will die." That day, Olga methodically sorted out the documents, organized files, prepared detailed instructions for her successor. Colleagues looked at her in bewilderment, calmness while waiting for hysteria or scandal. But she continued to work, as if nothing had happened. In the evening, sitting in her favorite mother's chair with a cup of cold tea, Olga made a decision. She will leave with dignity, without scandal and mutual accusations. But this doesn't mean she'll give up. She has 2 weeks to think about her next step. Years of work in the company gave her invaluable experience and an extensive network of contacts. Maybe it's time to start her own case. The next day, she wrote a short letter of resignation, dated it the day after her mother's funeral. Let Maxim choke on his optimization. She knew her departure would be his first step towards an inevitable fall, because only she knew all the intricacies of working with key clients, all the pitfalls, everything in the documentation, informal agreements. Putting the application on the table, Olga, for the first time in recent days, felt inner peace. She was no longer a victim of circumstances, became the author of her own new story. And this story has just begun. How old are you, and what city are you from? Write in stories, interesting. After Olga left, the office had an unusual atmosphere. Maxim, as if wanting to prove the correctness of his decision, launched a large-scale company reorganization campaign. New endless presentations, graphics, meetings, all this created the appearance of progress and movement forward. In a spacious conference room, Maxim held another meeting. His voice sounded confident when he represented a new structure of management. "We optimize processes, reduce costs, and increase efficiency." These words echoed from the glass walls. Young managers nodded vigorously, writing down every word on their tablets. However, in quiet moments, being alone in his office, Maxim felt something, unclear restlessness. He often went to the window, looking at the cityscape, and his fingers nervously tapped on the glass. Reports which Olga used to cook flawlessly now required additional checks. New employees who came to her place did not have the same depth of understanding of processes. In moments of anxiety, Maxim noticeably annoyed. "Where is the financial report according to the Vostok project?" His voice rang in the corridors. "Why has the client still not received the calculations?" His assistants were fussing, trying to live up to the tall standards that were once so easily supported by Olga. Meanwhile, Olga did not sit with her hands folded. She methodically called clients she worked with for years, not to lure them away. She was above it. Her calls were simple expressions of attention and care. "How is your new project going? Did you manage to solve that problem with documentation?" Clients appreciated this sincerity and professionalism. In the cool companies, began to circulate the first alarms. Some processes slowed down. Minor errors appeared in the documentation. Maxim tried not to notice these signs, plunging into the creation of new plans for reforms and transformations. Particularly significant was the case with a large tender Olga used to cook. All documentation, taking into account the slightest details and nuances. Now that it's new, the team submitted a package of documents. They discovered significant shortcomings. Maxim spent a sleepless night, personally checking every page. But there was time missed. There are new faces in the office, young professionals with ambitions, but without experience. They took on tasks with energy, but often missed important details that were obvious to Olga. Clients began to notice these changes. Some cautiously wondered where they had gone. Olga continued the previous contact, maintaining professional relationships with her ex-partners. She didn't speak badly about the company or Maxim, but her reputation as a reliable professional worked for her. Clients remembered how she solved their problems and found a way out of difficult situations. By the end of the second month after leaving Olga, it became obvious that the new system does not work as smoothly as Maxim was planning. More and more often, he stayed in the office late, trying to control all processes personally. Confidence started to crack, though outwardly he tried to maintain the image of a successful leader. In this silence before the storm, everyone took their position. Maxim strengthened his power through new rules and procedures, trying to fill out the emptiness left after losing a key employee. Olga, while maintaining professional dignity, continued to support those connections that had been built over the years of honest work. No one yet knew that this silence is a harbinger of serious changes, which will soon affect all participants in this story. In the meantime, the company continued to work, creating the appearance of stability and progress. But inside her, they were already ripening seeds of future shocks. So you don't miss new, interesting stories. First call. Ross Invest rang on Monday morning. The company's largest client notified termination of cooperation. Maxim sat in his office, rereading a letter about termination of the contract for the third time. His hands shook slightly as he opened a folder with financial indicators. Loss of such a client meant a serious blow to the company. There was a heavy, hanging atmosphere in the office corridors. The staff were whispering, exchanging worried glances. All remembered that it was Olga, for years, who maintained relations with Ross Invest. And her sudden departure clearly played a role in their decision. But that was just the beginning. A week later, an envelope landed on Maxim's desk, with a subpoena. Verification of documentation revealed serious violations in the financial statements for the last quarter. Those same documents that Olga checked before, now they contained critical mistakes made by the new team. Maxim spent a sleepless night, trying to find a way out of the situation. He called lawyers, but their forecasts were disappointing. Fines could reach millions of rubles, not to mention reputational losses. In the bathroom mirror room, he noticed how noticeably they sat, his whiskey for the last month. Around the office, rumors spread about an upcoming inspection from the main investor of the company, Alexei Strukov, famous for his uncompromisingness in matters of corporate governance. He requested a full audit of all Maxim's processes. Maxim tried to delay the inevitable, but every day brought new problems. Employees started looking for a new job. Turnover of personnel reached a critical level. Newcomers, whom Maxim recruited after Olga's dismissal, could not cope with the overload. Documents were lost, due dates missed, clients were upset and expressed dissatisfaction. In a desperate attempt to maintain control, Maxim began to spend long meetings, demanding explanations and threatening dismissals. But his authority was fading fast. One day, he accidentally heard how a young employee in the smoking room said, "If Olga Nikolaevna were here, this would not have happened." Meanwhile, there were rumors about problems in the market companies. Partners began to demand additional guarantees. Banks became wary. Maxim felt how the ground was slipping from under his feet. He tried to contact Olga, hinting at the possibility of her returning. But she didn't respond. The punchline was a letter from the tax office, with a requirement to provide documentation for the last year. Maxim knew that the new team made many mistakes in reporting, and their discovery was only a matter of time. Friday evening, sitting in an empty office, Maxim confessed for the first time to himself that he made an irreparable mistake. Having fired Olga, he took out a bottle from the safe, cognac which he kept for special occasions, and poured himself a full glass. Dusk was gathering through the window, and in his head, the thought was that his career, which he built for 15 years, may collapse at any moment. The last straw was a message from the secretary that Alexei Strukov called an extraordinary meeting of the board of directors for next week. Maxim knew what this meant. Only one thing: his time as leader was coming to an end. He closed his eyes and, for the first time in a long time, felt real fear of the future. Share this video with friends who this story can be interesting to. In the cold October morning, Alexei Strukov, chief investor of the company, without warning appeared in the office. His presence instantly changed the atmosphere. Employees fell silent, and Maxim saw him through the glass walls of his office. Strukov, tall and pale, a man in an impeccable suit, methodically walked around departments, studying documentation and talking with key employees. His questions were precise and inconvenient, especially when the topic came up about recent errors in accounting and the loss of a major client. Meeting in an hour. Everyone attend, announced Strukov, entering Maxim's office. The news spread throughout the office at lightning speed, creating a wave of anxious anticipation. There was an oppressive silence in the conference room. Strukov opened the laptop and displayed graphs of the company's performance decline for the last months. For the last quarter, we lost 30% of the client base. Critical errors in documentation, lawsuits, and this is just the beginning of the list. His voice was calm, but there was a feeling of steel in it. Maxim tried to make excuses and talked about temporary difficulties and a new strategy development, but every argument crashed against hard facts and figures presented by Strukov. Most interesting, Strukov continued that everything. These problems started after I was fired. Key employee of Olga Nikolaevna, employee who, as it turned out, warned about possible consequences. Decisions you made. Maxim turned pale even more. The hall became so quiet that I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Advice: directors made the decision. Maxim Andreevich, you are relieved of your position. General Director. Immediately, Strukov put a folder with documents. Everything you need is here. Service security escorts you to the exit. Maxim sat motionless, as if petrified. His career that he built over the years collapsed in front of all the employees, the very people in front of whom he just recently boasted of his successes, now silently watched his fall. In subsequent days, news about the collapse of Maxim spread throughout the business community. It turned out that the problems were deeper than it seemed initially. An audit revealed serious violations that Maxim tried to hide. His reputation, completely destroyed. Former partners turned away from him. The phone was silent, and the doors that were recently opened slammed in front of his nose. Maxim tried to find a new job, but his name was now associated with failure and incompetence. A week after dismissal, he accidentally met Olga in a cafe. She was sitting at a table with business people, confident and calm, with partners. Glances met for a moment, and Maxim was the first to look away. At that moment, he finally realized the value of his decisions. The final blow was an article in a business magazine analyzing reasons, the collapse of the company under his leadership. Journalists were merciless in calling him an example of how personal ambitions and unethical behavior can destroy. Maxim stopped attending business events. His social media profiles are quiet. A man who once dreamed of creating a business empire now spent his days in his empty apartment, turning over in his memory moments when everything went wrong, and understanding that his main mistake was betrayal of those who really were dedicated to the work. Like it if you liked this story, so I'll know that this genre interests you. 6 months after Maxim's loud fall, Olga stood at the panoramic window of her new office in the business center on Sadovoi Ring. The morning sun poured light into the spacious room, where employees had already started to gather. Many of them previously worked with her at Maxim's company. She ran her hand along the cool glass, remembering the day when she decided to found her own consulting firm. The initial capital was her savings and a small inheritance from her mother. Now, looking at the growing team of professionals, she understood that she made the right decision. Good morning, Olga Nikolaevna. Marina's voice was heard, her first and most dedicated employee. Documents for the Severstal project are ready for signing. Olga smiled, remembering how this large client had previously worked with Maxim's company and became one of the first who believed in her new beginnings. Trust and professionalism turned out to be stronger than corporate relations. In the new company, she deliberately created a different corporate culture. No closed doors. Her office was always open to staff. Weekly briefings were held in the format of an open dialogue, where everyone could express their opinion or share a problem. We have a call with a potential client in an hour, reminded Svetlana, the head of the Department of Development. They have heard a lot about our approach to work. The reputation of the new company did not grow through aggressive marketing or dumping, but due to the quality of services and honest attitude towards clients. Olga insisted on complete transparency in work. Every contract, every transaction, thoroughly checked. During the day, she held several meetings, discussed the development strategy with the team, and even found time for informal communication with employees over lunch. The new office was gradually filled with that special atmosphere she dreamed of. Here, professionalism and humanity were valued equally. In the evening, watching the financial results for the quarter, Olga noted steady growth. The company not only reached self-sufficiency, but also began to make a profit. However, the main thing she considered was not a financial achievement, but the atmosphere of trust and mutual respect she had created. Olga Nikolaevna, can I? A young employee, Katia, looked in the door. I have an idea for optimization of document flow. Of course, come in, Olga answered, noting to herself how this moment was strikingly different from that corporate culture created by Maxim, where initiative from below is often perceived as a threat. Later in the evening, when most of the employees had gone home, Olga walked around the office. In the dimness of the room, she felt a special peace. There was no place here for intrigues and betrayal that destroyed the previous company. The next morning, she found out that Maxim was trying to get a job in the regions, but his reputation follows him on his heels. The news did not cause her any gloating or regrets, just an understanding that everyone gets what they deserve. Completing the workday, Olga stayed at the same panoramic window. The city below was lit by evening lights, and in the reflection of the glass she saw her calm, confident face. The internal storm that raged after the layoffs finally subsided, yielding to a place of deep satisfaction, the right path. She got out of her bag a photograph of her mother and put it on the table next to the laptop. You were right, Mom. Everything is really happening for the best, Olga whispered, collecting documents before leaving home. This moment, she finally realized that the story with Maxim and the old company remained in the past. What was waiting for her ahead was the future she built with her own hands, on the foundation of honesty, professionalism, and respect for people. I also recommend checking out